Patman. Happy little games. Hey everybody, just a quick reminder that if you enjoy this content or any of my videos, be sure and leave a like. It helps support the channel and allows my videos to move it on up with YouTube's algorithm. Thanks again. What is it about the entire spy motif that people love so much? Is it the fast cars? Is it the fast women? Or is it just wanting to be that one person to stand up for what's right and vanquish the evil forces at play? The undercover operatives have invaded all of our pop culture, including literature, movies, and now video games. Today, we are going back to the wild and wacky 1960s to experience not only the Bat-Tusi, but also the classic Namco arcade game we are talking about today, Rolling Thunder. This influential run-and-gun cover-and-shoot arcade classic came along just after the golden age of arcades and is still a fun-tastic game to play. What manga inspired the look of this game? What arcade game directly influenced this game? What spiritual sequel was released just a few years later? So put on your scuba gear because we are doing a deep dive as we learn about the history of Rolling Thunder. The company of Namco have a list of arcade hits big enough to choke a horse. Going back to their early days, they had produced a number of classics such as Dig Dug, Xevious, Mappy, and the Mac Daddy of them all, Pac-Man, among others. Keep in mind, this all occurred within a 2 to 3 year period, so they were really on a roll. Also around this time, Taito produced the up and down, in and out spy classic Elevator Action, in which you take on the role of a secret agent that sees your character have to enter a number of secret doors to retrieve secret documents and potentially duck for cover for a few seconds at a time. This gameplay mechanic directly influenced Namco when they were creating their very own run-and-gun game. The hardware required to run this innovative game was Namco's System 86 board, which also played host to another of my favorites, Sky Kid Deluxe. The visual design of the game was influenced by various Japanese manga such as Golgo 13, City Hunter, and Cobra. Rolling Thunder was released by Namco in the arcades in 1986. As the story goes, a mysterious entity known as Mabu appears in New York City in the 1960s. On the outside, he appears to be a savior to the people, but on the inside, he is actually the clandestine leader of the secret organization Geldra, who plans on taking over the world. The World Criminal Police Organization, or WCPO, learned of Mabu's evil intentions and sent undercover agent Layla to Geldra's headquarters, but in the process, she was captured and tortured. The WCPO sent their best agent from the Rolling Thunder team, codenamed Albatross, to save poor Layla and put a stop to the evil Geldra once and for all. The game is a 1 or 2 player run-and-gun, duck-for-cover extravaganza which plays very similar to Shinobi, even though Rolling Thunder came out a year before. The controls are very straightforward with a standard 8-way joystick including a button for shooting and a button for jumping. You'll spend the majority of the game ducking behind boxes and shooting it out with a variety of bad guys while jumping back and forth between the upper and lower levels on the screen. Where this game differs from Shinobi though is that you have limited ammunition, so you have to use it wisely. Even if you use all of your bullets, you can still shoot a single bullet at a time, which really doesn't help considering the wave upon wave of enemies coming your way. To replenish your ammunition, there are a number of doors spread throughout the levels. These not only give you the much needed refill that you need to bust a cap in those various bad guys, but it also allows you to duck for cover at least for a few seconds at a time, similar to the strategy found in elevator action. In addition to the ammunition refill, some doors will also offer an upgraded machine gun, which is quite the welcome sight. As I mentioned, there are upper and lower floors in the game, which you have to be careful jumping between because enemies are constantly crawling out of the woodwork and coming out of the doors. On the first couple of levels, the bad guys are usually just blasting you with bullets, but certain ones also throw bombs as well. Also, in earlier levels, the enemies usually take one bullet to dispose of, but as the game progresses, so does the enemy's difficulty. In addition to becoming just a little bit sneakier, they also require multiple hits to kill. You have a life bar, but it's essentially pointless since running into an enemy decreases it in half, and getting shot will kill you dead. Speaking of dead, that's what you'll be the first few times you played this game. The difficulty is insane. While not quite as bad as Ghosts and Goblins, it's no walk in the park either. The game controls well, but since this is an early run-and-gun shooter, the controls are a bit restrictive. You can't change direction in midair, and you also can't fire your gun vertically. You also can't even fire your gun in midair. However, working within these confines is part of the challenge though, as you have to learn the patterns and use strategy all throughout if you plan on making it very far in this game. You also have to contend with the time limit, so you cannot prattle about taking in the sights. This game will also only allow you to continue a maximum of 6 times, which again makes the game even more difficult. The graphics and especially the animation is extremely smooth, and there are cutscenes between each level showing Layla as she is kidnapped and tortured by Geldra. The backgrounds are varied with everything from flaming pits to caves filled with bats. The enemies are also varied with panthers, flaming humanoids, and short, impish looking creatures called breakers. There are 10 stages to complete with 2 areas in each stage. Technically, the game only has 5 stages, and after completing these 5, you have to replay the original all over again, although some obstacles have been added and the difficulty has been ramped up. The first level you encounter is the office complex. Compound. The caves. The flaming pits. And Geldra's hideout. Once you make it through the second pass of Geldra's hideout, you have to contend with Mabu himself. If you successfully take care of him, a short cutscene is shown and the game is over. There were a couple of different versions of the arcade game and a few bootlegs to boot. You can tell these by the slight difference on the title screen, but there are a few other differences as well. The original version has the same background music in every stage, while the new version adds a new theme song. Enemy placement in the newer version has been altered to balance the game out and make the earlier levels just a bit easier. Also, cutscenes were added showing the peril that Layla is in. And finally, a stage select mode was added, allowing players to start the game on any of the first 5 stages. This, of course, depends on the dip switch settings. If you thought Rolling Thunder was just a bit too difficult, there were a couple of exploits you could use to give you just a little boost. The first one is from User Lounge Night and can be triggered in Area 5 and 10. If you time your jump just right, you will be invulnerable and actually walk behind the giant screen and console all the way to the end of the level. There is also a glitch that will give you unlimited ammunition. Rolling Thunder was a smash hit and it spawned a number of home conversions, which I will cover at the end of the video. You know a game is a classic when other companies attempt to copy it. Just a couple of years after the official release of Rolling Thunder, the copycats started to emerge, with the first one being Super Ranger from South Korea company Suna. There is no way around it, folks. This is a blatant clone of Rolling Thunder, but it at least offered a couple of new features, such as expanded weapons and 2-player simultaneous action. You have to rescue the damsel in distress while going in and out of doors to upgrade your weaponry. The gameplay isn't too bad, but it's not quite as tight as the controls found in Rolling Thunder. Capcom didn't waste any time putting out Codename Viper for the NES. Now, I've seen some blatant copycats in my day, but this one takes the cake. The basic gameplay is essentially the same, with the main character using a gun. There is also jumping between upper and lower levels, going inside doors to receive ammunition, and shooting the various bad guys. This game is a little bit different as you have to rescue hostages. With that being said, the game is still a lot of fun, which goes to show just how good the original Rolling Thunder was. Also that same year, released in arcades, was Thunder Jaws by Atari. The original Rolling Thunder was distributed in North America by Atari Games, so rather than wait on a sequel from Namco, they decided to create their own. What do you get when you take Rolling Thunder, mix it up with the James Bond motif, and in particular, the major antagonist for Bond, and you get Thunder Jaws. This knockoff takes elements from the 007 movies such as Thunderball and Octopussy. This game features 2 types of gameplay throughout each stage, with the first one being an underwater zone in which you have to dive and swim through the levels, shooting enemies such as mutants, divers, and the occasional robotic shark. Your main weapon is a spear gun, but you can acquire different ones. The second part, you are above ground in the base zone, where the game does its best Rolling Thunder impersonation to date. You have to jump between levels and shoot the various baddies that come in and out of the doors. You also have to duck for cover behind boxes. Where Codename Viper was at least an excellent game with smooth animation and great playability, this game is not. While the graphics are large and have a lot of detail, the animation is very choppy and everything just has a clunky feel to it, similar, and I hate to say this, to Batman the Arcade game, also by Atari. This does try to differentiate itself in other ways by including a simultaneous two-player mode, as well as the ability to shoot vertically in the above water sections. It's not a bad game, just not quite as good as Rolling Thunder. In 1991, arcade goers were finally treated to the follow-up with the fantastic Rolling Thunder 2. This is a 1 or 2 player simultaneous run and gun that features very similar gameplay to the original. There has been a bit of a time jump, and instead of taking place in the wild and wacky 1960s, this one is set in the year 1990X. But curiously enough, it features both Albatross and Layla. In this game, Layla is no longer the damsel in distress and instead takes the lead, which was quite unique back in 1991. The second player controls Albatross. Even though they look different, they play exactly the same. As far as the story goes, a number of satellites from various countries were destroyed, sending the world into chaos. The WCPO have learned that Geldra has risen from the ashes, and it's up to Layla and Albatross to stop those dastardly evildoers and save the world. First off, the graphics have been given a significant update thanks to the upgraded technology from Namco's System 2 hardware. It features lots of details, improved animation, and silky smooth parallax scrolling. There are even some naked, voluptuous statues in the background, so quick, somebody call Senator Lieberman. The sound effects, and in particular the music, have also been updated with a number of different tracks as opposed to the sparse offerings in the first game. The gameplay itself hasn't changed very much with the usual in and out and duck for cover. You can still pick up more ammunition and a submachine gun by entering certain doors. In between each level are cutscenes that further expand the story similar to the first game. You will travel all over the world from Egypt to airplane hangars as you try to stop Mabu. This game is fantastic and is a worthy addition to the Rolling Thunder franchise. This was never released in the arcades here in the States, but it was released for the Sega Genesis, although scaled back a bit as far as graphic quality. It did offer a lot of new levels and an expanded storyline. Rolling Thunder 3 was a console exclusive for the Sega Genesis, and it was released in 1993. For whatever reason, this game was released only in North America, and it does mark the final game in the series. The game is also set in the year 1990X, and instead of revolving around Layla and Albatross, who are tracking a different criminal organization, you take control of a new agent by the name of Jay, who is assigned to take down Geldra's second-in-command, Dredd. The gameplay is essentially the same, but there have been a few new upgrades. For starters, you have 9 different weapons you can choose from as you blast through 10 levels and a few secret areas. You can select which weapon to use at the beginning of each level, everything from a submachine gun to a bazooka to a flamethrower. Unlike the last game, this one is only a single player affair. There are now 2 separate fire buttons, one for the standard pistol and one for the special weapon you choose at the beginning of the stage. To give your feet a little rest, certain levels allow you to either ride a motorcycle on slick highways or use jet skis. Your health bar has 3 units instead of 1, allowing you to take more hits before dying. Unlike other games, when you die, you restart at that point. There is a password feature as well as a special code to play as a female agent by the name of Ellen. It also produced a handheld game that was released only in Japan. A Rolling Thunder theme was seen in NS Pac-Man 99, which featured the original music and Albatross collecting the dots. In 2012, the story of Albatross unfolded over a number of webcomics from Namco entitled Rapid Thunder. From what I can gather, the website is no longer active unless somebody has it archived somewhere else. A handheld version of the game was released by My Arcade, but unfortunately it's just the NES version and not the arcade. It does a great job at replicating the original look of the arcade cabinet, and it does control fairly well.
戦いの時が来た。撃って撃って撃ちまくれ。ローリングサンダー。ナムコ。
In 1987, we were treated to the home computer versions of Rolling Thunder. These were done by two-time Grammy-winning Development House of the Year Tiertex and published by US Gold. Just by taking a look at the advertisement for this game, you can tell US Gold wasn't thrilled with how it turned out. Rather than showcase the game's graphics, there is a bunch of negative space and tiny boxes for the screenshots. There are quite a few to get through, so let's take a look. When I got this game for my Amiga back in 1988, I must have been young and stupid because I didn't think it was too bad. Perhaps it was just the novelty of playing it at home on my PC, but looking at it now, good Lord, what was I thinking? This is one of the worst conversions I have ever seen, next to hard driving and Chase HQ for the Commodore 64. Let's start with the actual graphics. All of the ports, no matter which computer format, features a windowed version, which I would assume was done to increase the speed. I've said it before and I'll say it again, if that's what they were trying to attempt, they failed miserably. The speed runs at about 1/3 of the arcade game, making everything extremely choppy. Thanks to the single fire button provided on the Amiga, sacrifices had to be made. For example, to jump up on a ledge, you push up and fire. To jump down from the ledge, you push up and fire. It makes absolutely no sense. All of the levels did make it over, however the cutscenes are missing and so is the ending. There is music and sound effects while we play, which is always a plus, but unless you're into S&M, I would avoid this game at all costs. A hack was released a couple of years ago which sped the game up quite a bit, but even at the accelerated pace, it was still a steaming turd. This was accomplished by Amiga programmer McGeezer thanks to Tiertex leaving around 80% of the finished source code on the original disc. This allowed him to make modifications for the game to run around 20 to 25 frames per second as opposed to the pitiful 7 frames per second of the original. The Atari ST port looks similar to the Amiga, although the colors are not quite as vibrant. The music has also seen a downgrade, but the same broken controls still exist in this version. What is nice though is that the game does run slightly faster. The Commodore 64 version features an ugly status box at the bottom of the screen, but at least the speed is decent. Apparently a door thief is on the loose as they are all missing. It doesn't matter as you can still go inside and collect your ammunition. The colors are very drab and the backgrounds are not very detailed. We do get a nice rendition of the arcade theme on the title screen and decent sound effects all throughout. It plays pretty good, so considering it's from TierTex, that's all we could hope for. The Amstrad version looks pretty nice with lots of vibrant colors. The sprites are detailed and the speed of the game is fairly decent. Something else you may have noticed though is the lack of enemies on screen, which definitely helps in the difficulty department. The same stiff controls as found in other versions rears their ugly head here, although they aren't quite as bad considering the speed of the game is fairly close. Also, the sound is pretty much non-existent with no music and only sparse sound effects. The ZenX Spectrum port is not bad if you can get past the urine-colored graphics. There is still a bit of color clash going on with enemies sometimes blending into the background. However, it becomes less of an eyesore the more you play it. The sprites are animated well and the speed is actually pretty consistent with the arcade game. The scrolling though is a bit choppy, making gameplay not so great. There is no music and typical of Spectrums back in the day, all we get are tiny little popcorn queefs sprinkled throughout. The NES version of Rolling Thunder is awesome, especially back in the day. The colors and details have been scaled back, making all the characters look like string beans, but with that being said, they are animated nicely and the scrolling is smooth. The Nintendo version was the only conversion to include cinematics in between each area, but for some reason they redrew them. There are not as many enemies on screen at once due to technical limitations with the hardware. You have limited continues, but thankfully a password system has been included. The game controls great, and thanks to the 2-button pad, we finally have a version with a dedicated jump and a dedicated fire button. The Famicom version is pretty much identical except for the sound. This version uses the Namco 163 mapper chip, which uses extended sound channels for better sound quality. Just take a listen. An Atari Link's version was in development in the early 90s, but everyone assumed it was vaporware. Aside from a couple of screenshots in various gaming magazines, not too much was known about it. Apparently, there were 2 separate versions in development, but neither one ever saw the light of day. However, in 2022, a prototype was discovered of the earlier version, which was ultimately scrapped. Only one level is playable, but it's cool to see what could have been a great conversion. The original arcade game can be found on Namco Museum Encore for the PlayStation, Namco Museum Battle Collection for the PSP, Namco Museum Virtual Arcade for the Xbox 360, and part of the extraordinary set entitled Namco Museum 50th Anniversary. The game also popped up on the Wii Virtual Console in Japan, and it's part of Pac-Man's Arcade Party 30th Anniversary arcade machine. And finally, it's also been released as part of the Arcade Archives on the Nintendo Switch. Rolling Thunder is one of my all-time favorite games, and I have fond memories of playing it at our local Happy Joe's Pizza Parlor. The title was hugely influential and doesn't seem to get the love it so rightly deserves. If you've never had the chance to rescue a damsel in distress, all the while going in and out of doors, give this game a shot. You'll be glad you did. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. If you would like to contribute but not sign up for my Patreon, you can always click the donate button up above. Thanks everyone for watching.